Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rishu Srivastava, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Tillid, which is a technology-led childcare platform. I will be moderating the discussion today. Some housekeeping points for everybody who has joined. We would be recording this session. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rishu Srivastava, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Tillid. Sorry, is that any better? Yeah, apologies for that. So yeah, some housekeeping bits. We will be recording the session today. And in terms of the questions, if anybody has any questions for our panel, please put them on the chat and we'll pick it up at the end of the session. Now, given this has been the week of International Women's Day, a couple of days back, on 8th March when it was International Women's Day, with the theme of breaking the bias, we would like to take this opportunity to recognize the effort that has been put by women globally and men who are trying to support the women to break the bias in their own ways. So today we will be discussing if organizations can do more to support working mothers in workplace, which is why we have the panel that we have today. They're all working parents and successful professionals. So I'd like to, name them out, and if they could perhaps take a minute to introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Tatiana. If you could do a short introduction, please.
Yes, absolutely. Glad to be here. I think it's going to be an exciting discussion. So in about a week, I'm joining Viva Systems as a healthcare company as the head of their strategy in the UK. Before that, for the last 8 years, I've been with McKinsey & Company. It's a management consulting company where I've been doing work in healthcare across a variety of topics, from large-scale transformations to more of a hardcore data and analytics towards more traditional strategy. I moved to London last year. Before that, I lived in the US for quite a while. I have 2 kids. One is a toddler, he's 2.5, and another one was just born, a little girl. She's 3 months. So but this topic is very close to me, and I'm really excited to be here and have this discussion.
Thank you, Tatiana. You've got your hands full with 2 kids running around. So hats off to you for that, managing work and, the kids together. Ruchita, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you for having me here. Just like Tatiana, I believe this is going to be an exciting conversation, at least for me, because I'm a new mom, first baby, 3-month-old, and just, getting my grips on my life and sleep and house. It's everywhere. Life feels like it's thrown into bits everywhere. So this is an important topic, especially most of us are like dual couple or dual working couples. So both father and mother work these days. So the support systems that workplace puts in place is an important discussion topic. I work with Vodafone at the moment as in their human resources department. I'm senior HR VP, and then prior to Vodafone, I used to work for Procter & Gamble. I've worked in Singapore and India before I moved to London about 6 years ago. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Ruchita. Congratulations on your little one.
Thank you.
Richard, what about you?
Hey everyone. I think everyone has already said how exciting it is to be here, so why not make it 3, complete the set. I am Richard Odufisan. I'm also a new parent. I have a little baby boy who's 5 months old, so equally learning how to find the balance and really understanding the impact and importance of being a good partner is in this process. I think we could talk about it through the session, but definitely on the theme of breaking the bias, understanding so much more about the role that I have to play as a man in this space as well, in supporting and providing the space for my partner to continue to be successful, but also to get the rest she needs in this time, because it is a lot. In terms of my background, I work for Deloitte. So I'm a chief of staff in our technology, strategy and transformation practice. This is a very recent shift across, as I started in technology transformation delivery. So I was very much a delivery focused person. And over the last few years, I think it's been about 4 years now, my shift has been more into the diversity and inclusion space. So looking at how I can help to set the culture, both internally at Deloitte, but also for our clients and externally across industry, to make a bit of a change in what our experiences are as individuals across this space.
Thanks, Richard, and congratulations to you too for your little one who's just 5 months old. So I suppose all of you've got a very busy lifestyle. You would be wondering what is my interest in this subject. So I've been working in technology for 17 years myself for a multinational IT services company. 2 years back, I had my daughter Kiara, and that is when I went on maternity. So I've got a 2-year-old. And when I was on the maternity leave, most part of my maternity went during the pandemic. And it was extremely hard when I was looking at getting back to work, primarily because there was a constant change in the government guidelines for COVID. So when I was looking at procuring childcare for myself, I realized that it is not that easy. And in terms of in-home childcare, like, hiring a nanny. And what was an eye-opener at that point was when I started doing some research, it was quite astonishing that 4 out of 5 women in the UK have to pause their career after childbirth. And that's quite a high number, given that, women work equally hard or maybe more when it comes down to professional life. So that led to Tillit being born with the focus of making end-to-end process for in-home childcare transparent and hassle-free. Our aim has been to get as many mothers as possible back to work. And that reminds me of one of the saying by Indra Nooyi, which was a couple of years back, or maybe even more, where she says that for a woman, there is a conflict when it comes down to the biological clock and a career clock. And I so agree to it, because we constantly have to juggle between professional and personal life. And in most cases, mothers are the primary carer. And when it comes down to getting back to work, they often die of guilt, because you know that you are leaving your child behind. You don't know how things are going to be. So Tatiana, coming to you, what do you think about the juggles that we have to do? And do you think you got the right support from your employer? Anything that surprised you during the time when you were off or you were at work as well after your first paternity?
Yeah, no, thanks. That's a really important question. So I've been incredibly lucky, and I think that the type of support that my employer provides is quite outstanding. So I'm happy to share in a moment on what exactly that is. I think another, I'm also very lucky in my personal life. My husband does way more than 50%. So I don't know how I want a jackpot. So I'm incredibly grateful to him, and he's also always very mindful that that I have to juggle, and also there are some stereotypes that still coming up in professional settings. So I'm incredibly grateful to him. So now, in terms of what my employer did, I think so. There's a couple things. I think so. There are two parts actually. One on the emotional side, and another one is on the content side. So on the emotional side, I think the HR team was doing an outstanding job at just talking to me, trying to understand what goes through my head, how I'm feeling at this specific point in time, and that was incredibly valuable. And more on the content side, so what I found very helpful back when I was pregnant, before I gave birth to my first child, is actually like a little bit of strategizing and planning on how my last couple of months before delivery will look like, and a few months back from maternity will look like. So a little bit of planning around like what type of job I will be focusing on, particular focus on the lifestyle, and making sure that I don't have like too much work in the evening after hours, because in consulting world, it's like hours are often quite long. So that was a combination, basically, of emotional and support, and just like thinking together through how to make it work personally for me, given my own personal circumstances, and that was quite incredible.
Great to hear. Thank you. Ruchita, what about yourself? Before you went on maternity and now that you're on maternity, did you get the support you need from your employer, and anything that was quite surprising for you?
So I would say, even for me, I think I was very lucky with the kind of support I had. I feel quite privileged to work in a company which has, amazing support system in place for new parents. And just like Tatiana, I think she put it very well to say that there is always two sides to maternity. One is the emotional support, and then the other is the content, the structure, processes that company has put in place. And I think for me, just having very understanding colleagues, teammates around me was very helpful. Even the client group that I supported, they were extremely understanding. If I wanted flexible hours, for example, during maternity, I had to constantly shift my hours. Sometimes I would start late and stop late for few weeks, and then suddenly my body changed, and then I was waking up early, so I switched it back again. So there was always that flexibility. Then there came a point where I had to reduce my hours because I started having a bit of difficulty towards the end of my pregnancy, and then everybody was supportive. So I think what helps all my colleagues and team person also be very supportive is when companies put the right structure in place. So when you educate enough and when you've spread enough awareness amongst employees, then it almost becomes a culture to support each other and lift each other during these important life stages. Because it's temporary. It's not like I'm going to be like this forever, asking for shift in working pattern, reduced working hours, etc. But during this critical time, if employers can make it a culture to support each other, it really goes a long way, because now I feel more loyal and more passionate about my role, my company. I'm excited to go back because people are still in touch with me. So it's a little bit of giving more in the short term to an expecting mother, but in the long term, I think it pays back very well.
That's nice to hear, Ruchita. Richard, what about you? It's slightly different for you, given that you would have taken some paternity and you have to support your wife.
Yeah, I think it was like you say, a very different experience, because as a first-time father, one of the things that I don't think was really explained to me was just how much of an intentional effort it would need to be for me to be a part of the pregnancy. Because up until the birth, there's still that distance as a man, right, between me and this baby that we're having together. And we spoke about the emotional toll that it can take, but being a working father or the non-birthing parent in the partnership, it can often be a bit of a barrier between you and the process itself. So much so that I know that going up to the point of going off on paternity leave, I was still like, I could feel the kicks, I felt those moments, but it wasn't like that constant connection, that constant building of relationship. So right up until the day when my baby came, it felt very far. It was over there, as opposed to something that was necessarily happening to me. And then suddenly when he's here and I'm able to get hands-on and I can hold him, I can take part in kind of his care, that's when suddenly there is a big mental switch that says, wait a minute, there's something I'm expected to do here. So I suppose I was, again, very fortunate because Deloitte, we offer an extra 2 weeks of paternity leave on top of the statutory. So our minimum is 4 weeks. And I was able to take 7 weeks of shared parental leave with my wife. So overall, mixing that with annual leave, I actually had 3 months right at the start with my son, which was a gift, a massive gift that not many people have. When I think about what it would have felt like to go back after 2 weeks, I can't imagine just how much of an impact that would have had on my connection with my son, the impact on my wife and her ability to manage, particularly with how much changes in the first 3 months, right? Suddenly the sleeping shifts, the feeding shifts, the emotional toll that she wouldn't have had someone alongside to support with. Not to mention then when I did go back to work in January, so I've been back for 2 months now, that rebalancing again, I think we maybe undermine and underestimate just how much of a continual shift it is. It's not just from the moment of pregnancy, it's not just when you have the actual delivery, and it's not just when you go back to work. There's just a constant sense of shifting that can make it very difficult to find your center and keep your center.
Thank you, Richard. That leads me to the next question for you, Tatiana. When you were off or going off on maternity, were there things that you felt that your employer could have done better? Was there any additional support you thought would be necessary?
So I think like in my case, I was really lucky. So the company provided so much support. And I think just one thing, maybe it's kind of this a little bit of a shift in focus just from working mom, but also towards working dad. That would be really helpful. But in terms of the actual benefits, I think they did a pretty outstanding job. I think one thing that they did particularly incredibly is they offer these extra days during your maternity leave when you can actually reach out to people and talk to your colleagues and kind of stay in touch with the community of your colleagues. So that was just a really interesting thing that's kind of quite unusual, I think. But in terms of what others could like learn from, that would be like a very interesting example from how I see it. But in terms of specific benefits, I personally couldn't think of what else they could offer. Just like shifting a bit of focus towards dads, and also always reminding that remembering that there are two parents, right? So that would be really, really great.
That's nice to hear. Ruchita, wearing your HR hat, what do you think? I mean, you are a first-time mom yourself. What do you think? Do you think employers can do something beyond what they are currently offering?
Depends now who's the employer. I think a lot of employers these days are doing a lot in this space. So for example, at Vodafone, we have improved our paternity leave to 6 months. So this is, but you take it in chunks. So it's not in one go, but it's up to 6 months. And that's a massive support to working moms and the baby, and eventually for the whole family. So it depends to your question, going back to your question, who's the employer? Some employers are really doing so much in this space. I think there is something that we can do better, which is planning a return. So having these open, transparent conversations with our teams, with our managers, to say what type of roles we want to come back into, what type of lifestyle we want, what type of hours we are ready to commit. And it may not be upfront because you don't have idea, especially if you're first time mom, what your life is going to look like. For example, I was telling my boss, I remember before I went on, that I want to be back in 4 months time. I can't, imagine being at home for 4 months because I've already been at home for 2 years thanks to this pandemic. And I felt like just when things are starting to open up and I'm back home with the baby, so I was like, no, I'm ready to come back. But now spending time with my little one, I feel like, no, I was a bit foolish to think I would be ready to go back in 4 months. Just having this thought process, we can do a bit better to share what our intention is with our employers so that they can help us, is what I would say.
Right, Richard, what are the top ways you think the employers could support mothers in workplace, or maybe even the dads, given that you are a working dad? What is the support that would be required so that the moms can perform well when they're coming back to work?
So I think breaking it down into really short-term, medium-term, and longer-term approaches, right? Short-term, getting the conversation started, talking more about what it means to be a working parent. What does that look like when, in terms of sorting out maternity leave, maternity pay, having real clarity on the options available. For example, with shared parental leave, how your employees can take advantage of that. Because what it does do is it removes some of the mystique. You don't worry so much about, oh, how am I going to afford it? What is it going to mean in terms of paid leave? What does it mean in terms of my time out? Some of those worries, if you're able to clarify what the processes look like and how they impact right at the start, it can make it that little bit easier for both birthing parents, adopting parents, anyone who's going through the process of becoming a parent, right, to understand what it really means, what it looks like. And just that bit of transparency, that bit of clarity can make a huge impact on the number of people who take it up as an option. In the middle term, I think, aligning with what Ruchita was saying, we need to think about being intentional about the process for returning. What we forget is that, like I said, this is a big shift. It's a lifestyle shift. So it's not going to be as simple as just going off and coming back and being able to work in exactly the same ways you did beforehand. So what does that look like for your people in terms of availability of childcare, in terms of requirements for different working hours? Like I think Tatiana and Ruchita mentioned it in terms of shifting it while they were pregnant. But what does that look like for a working parent? Have we thought about that? Have we considered the impacts that it might have, particularly in this new world that we're working in, right? If people are still working from a combination of at home and in the office, what does that mean in terms of childcare, in terms of new responsibilities? And from a longer term perspective, I think it is completely reviewing the processes that we have. Right, in our businesses, we have so many processes, from attraction through to development, progression, promotion, all the way through to retention, right? And we need to think about, do these processes work for everyone? When we're going out to attract and recruit people, and we're talking about how we address the gender balance and how we address the bias, do the processes we have encourage working parents to apply for our roles? Do they provide a space that says, yes, you are able to come into this company, and regardless of your responsibilities, regardless of your commitments, you have just as much potential for success in this firm as someone who doesn't have a child or a family to look after? And equally, when we're talking about progression and promotion, right, it's looking at that. Are we expecting people to fulfill requirements that will negatively impact those who have responsibilities like children or just care at home? Right. I think we've spoken about it already, but there is a social programming, an expectation that places a lot of the home care, whether that is for children or for elder family members, that falls culturally on women. So what does that do then for their career progression and their opportunities? And how are we taking that into account as we're designing these processes to either support them and still provide the opportunities, whether that's in flexible hours, whether that is in part-time working, however it needs to look, or how are we encouraging the non-birthing partners to also take part in the process, to recognize that they have a role to play in the non-salaried work that is looking after home, that is looking after children, it's looking after family. So in short, it's talk more, provide support for the return, and think about whether the processes work.
That's great inputs, Richard. Tatiana, do you want to add anything on what Richard has just spoken about, the priorities of organizations? What is it that they could do?
I really agree with him with the point that he's making, and I think there are some things that are very tactical, and the others are more like cultural and around the overall narrative and requirements and expectations, and how do we shape all of those things together in a way that the company still delivers what it's supposed to deliver, while everyone feels comfortable and equally empowered, regardless of having a child, almost regardless of having a child. So I think this is a very tricky thing to do. I have some thoughts, but I don't want to derail. So maybe Rishu, if you want to go to the next question, and happy to come back to that later if relevant.
I'm happy for you to talk about it now.
Yeah, so I think I have a couple things that I find around narrative being quite important personally for me. So I think when we're talking about women, right, there's always this like a little bit of a question mark, right, whether I'm talking to a woman as a mom, as a professional, as an individual, like especially to those who have kids, right? So I'm entering a business meeting, right? I feel like I'm almost supposed sometimes to acknowledge that I have kids, and then to keep going with the conversation. But then at the same time, if I'm acknowledging it and like being upfront, it would a little bit kind of derail the conversation in a way, like would people perceive me more like a mom rather than a professional? And it's kind of a three-dimensional thing, right? Like kind of like professional, a mom, and an individual. So in a work context, I personally like to come across more as a professional and discuss ideas that are more related to work, right? Rather than more related to the parenthood. It's kind of like we need just to be very mindful when we're creating like this extra benefits for women, right? Being very thoughtful about maternity leave, getting ready for maternity leave, coming back from maternity leave. How do we do it in a way that it doesn't create additional bias, right? Because it could create additional bias. So this narrative and expectations almost are like a very, very important. So I wouldn't want everyone to start a conversation with me. Hey, how are your kids doing today? I mean, they're doing great. Can we talk business here, please, for a moment? So this is a little bit of like more subtle, like cultural side, I guess. And maybe the second one is like also quite a tricky one, right? I think Richard, you were talking a little bit about this. Is like in this new COVID environment, right? And flexibility of hours. Can we think more about like deliverables rather than expectations of being in front of a laptop like 9 to 6 or 9 to whatever the lifestyle is, right? Because I would like to manage and be managed, right, as by output rather than by process, right? I want to be able to decide on my own how many hours and when I put into the effort, and how do I engage with people around in a way that I'm still delivering of what I would like to deliver, right? And I think this is also like another little bit of a subtle thing, right? Because if any employee is expected to spend 9 hours, 10 hours in front of a laptop all the day, it's a very different environment that favors people who don't have kids. But if every employee is expected to deliver a certain amount of work, regardless of the time and hours, and regardless of when during the day these hours are dedicated, it's a completely different environment, and everyone can be equally successful. I'm happy to dedicate 10, 12 hours to work, but I want to decide when they are those 10, 12 hours.
Yeah, and I think that becomes more important, especially with the homeschooling scenario that came up with the pandemic, right? Because, parents have to be the teachers as well. You're having 5-year-old getting onto Zoom calls, and you would have your own meetings at that time. So you would need some flexibility to plan around the homeschooling aspects as well. So I completely hear you on that, Tatiana, and I agree with you. Ruchita, this is a question for you coming from, you being an HR professional. Statistically, 41% of working mothers say being a parent is holding them back from promotion at work. Do you think this is true? And if so, what positive change on the work front can be done to improve this situation?
I think there is, despite all the good work that, a lot of big multinationals are doing on this front, I think there tends to be bias against working mom, just because they need more flexibility in hours, in the days that they work, sometimes taking time off suddenly because the little one is sick. And especially in early years when they're put into play school, kids are picking up bugs all the time. And I've always seen it's mostly the moms rushing to pick the kids up from the play school. I have seen a few fathers, but the number of moms who do that far outweighs the number of fathers who do that at work. So all these, little things add up. And yes, I mean, I wouldn't say that there are employers, that all employers have mastered how to overcome this unconscious bias. There are many employers who would still be struggling with this bias at workplace. I think something that all employers can do, and which is where even I would say the big companies who have very robust processes have not tackled this, is how do you look at both men and women as caregivers, and start to have policies and then processes which actually enables both of them to look after the kids. And once that starts to happen, only then this thing is going to reduce. If we see more men rushing off to nursery to pick up their kids because the little one is not well, if men take longer leaves at the time of childbirth, it's going to have a bigger impact on how we view women who are going through maternity. Because what Tatiana was saying, when she walks into a meeting, and if only she's being asked, about how her kids are doing at home, and how she's doing as a new mom, but not say her partner when he goes into his work, then that's a signal enough that we're not viewing both parents as equal caregivers. Whereas in her case, she mentioned that her partner does more than 50% at home. So it's like, how do we start viewing men at work also as primary caregivers? Because that's the reality, especially when we live in developed Western countries, that both partners pitch in almost equally. It may be 60-40 the other way around, like women giving in more, but men are doing more and more. So how do you take the narrative of child birth to the men as well? So yes, promotions, childbirth, maternity, early years, looking after the baby could hold women back. A lot of it is through unconscious bias at work. So instead of looking at how much they are producing or delivering, employers may tend to look at how much hours my female employee is putting in. Is she online enough? Is she attending the social meetings after work? Is she coming out for beer or drinks, which she would previously, but now she cannot because she has to rush for bath time. So these biases, unconscious biases, need to be almost trained out of the system, and it takes time. It's not going to be a quick fix. These are culturally set in our minds, that people who work longer, harder, are available after work, are available on call, are more committed and will be rewarded. And somebody who has figured out multitasking and can sneak 2 hours at night when the baby is sleeping, or over weekend, is delivering equally good work, but is probably not as visible, is not doing enough. So I think the piece we need to tackle is the unconscious bias at work, and how do we talk about these little signals and clues that we pick up as being signs of being productive. That needs to change. That just by showing up every day for 10 hours is not saying I'm productive.
That's so true. It's the work that should speak and not the hours. So just building on to that, Ruchita, what Ruchita was saying, in developing nations, there are policies that have been laid down by the government that there should be childcare or a creche facility or a nursery within a kilometer or a 2-kilometer radius. While in the UK, Tatiana, less than 5% of the companies provide daycare, childcare facilities on premise. Do you know why, or do you want to add on to it?
I don't know why, but I can think of some possible reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, like when we're thinking about benefits, right, there are two components, right? Again, how they're helping people and what does it cost for a company. And I think on-site nursery or on-site childcare, it just costs disproportionately a lot. Think about, especially for smaller employers, think about it. It's probably a different license, right? It's or like an additional partner. It's some additional administrative costs. It's a lot easier just to provide, say, backup care, right? For example, this is what my company is doing. I have an email where I can send a note saying that, hey, my nanny is not available tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. I really need some backup help. It's equally helpful for the employer because I'm back to work, right? And it's also good for me because my child is taken care of. On-site nursery would probably be a nice idea, but I think just in terms of logistics and how to make things work, like very practical and very operational, I would say that it's probably easier to do it through a backup childcare provider.
Are there other benefits that the employers provide when it comes down to specifically childcare, Tatiana?
So this backup care is a great one, specifically to childcare. I think my employer is very flexible in terms of the hours, so everyone will absolutely understand, and there will be no questions asked if I say that, hey, I need a 2-hour break in the afternoon. I have an emergency, or I have a block with my child from 4 to 5 or from 1 to 2, whatever it is. Everyone will be just very understanding of that, and pretty much anyone can do it, like regardless of the gender and almost regardless of the gender. So thinking if anything specific to childcare, not that I know of, but that one with the backup care is like absolutely priceless because it's very low stress for me. Childcare is a lot about stress, right? If my nanny got sick, it's like, what do I do tomorrow? And this backup care really helps. So I strongly encourage anyone who can ask the employer to get that backup childcare. It's fantastic for everyone, for employer as well, right? Because you're back to work.
Yeah. Richard, you've been doing a lot of work in terms of diversity and inclusion. And I was reading somewhere in one of the recent surveys that about 45% of BAME women said they have to cope with demands on their time. Do you believe we need to give additional support to BAME women?
So what I think I would say about that is it goes back to the culture. So culturally, again, when we look at some of the expectations on women from communities, from whether it's from Africa, whether it's from Asia, there tends to be an expectation that the women are the ones who are supposed to provide and be the mothers and look after the home. So that expectation, combined with the conflicting priorities of working in the West, in the UK especially, can create a bit of a pull on their time, pull on their efforts to try to meet both expectations. What I would say though, in terms of whether they need more support, is to be intentional about listening to the people in the spaces that you're in. So for women from non-British backgrounds, essentially, part of the challenge can come from the fact that their support system isn't necessarily going to be in this country or in the same city as them, right? Whereas if they do, so I happen to know that with our family, my wife's parents live 20 minutes drive away from us. My parents live 30 minutes drive away. So we are in a very privileged position to be able to say, if all else were to fail, we could probably quite easily get to our families to ask for support. Whereas if you have family who are mainly based in another country or in another part of the UK, that can be a challenge, including for people from non-minority ethnic backgrounds. So I wouldn't say as a blanket statement that they all need extra support. I would say it's important to understand the needs of the people in your business, in your spaces, to then provide support that works for them individually.
Thank you, Richard. Ruchita, being a first-time mom, you would understand, and I think others would as well, that the stress doesn't necessarily come when there's a lack of childcare. It could be a lot of other aspects. For example, educating parents on how to parent, how to become a parent, or it could be sleep training, it could be breastfeeding. There are just way too many topics, which is a new thing for the first-time moms or dads, right? So, and all of this can potentially lead to a lot of anxiety, given that, you are coping with sleepless nights, with a crying baby, not knowing what to do. Is there any support that companies can offer in terms of well-being for parents?
I can't agree more with this statement, that the whole conversation ends at childbirth in most companies, and that's it. So these minor things, which are actually major, don't get spoken about enough. And sometimes I wonder how much employers need to do, because these aspects of life, they keep changing. So after this it would be something. So I think it's what employers can do is enable the parents to help each other first, because that first-hand information from each other helps a lot. So what I mean is having a support network for parents. So intentionally creating that at workplace, to say, we have a lot of new parents and experienced parents, so why not create a forum and make sure that it runs, and you're inviting people, you're making people aware that there are these forums, and having some very intentional topics to discuss. For example, breastfeeding, share your experiences, slightly more experienced moms with the pregnant moms. So for example, I would have benefited a lot if I had heard other moms' experience, because I struggled the first few weeks, and only because I reached out to some of the moms I knew from work to say, hey, this is happening, did this happen to you, what did you do? And the moment I heard their experience, which was quite similar to mine, I calmed down. So you're right to say that there is so much of anxiety post childbirth that no one has addressed at work, at least. I enrolled in a program that NCT runs. It's a 3-day course for expecting parents. So it teaches you a lot, but nobody there has experience, because everybody is going to be a parent. And what the power of workplace is that you have people from all stages of life, so really experienced, maybe just few months into the baby, and really the ones who are going into maternity, so the pregnant parents. And then the other aspect is like just the lack of social life once you have the baby. So while you are working, you have that adult interaction every day. And as a working person now, I feel sort of vacuum in my life, and my baby is sleeping, or when I feel like I have things under control, what do I do with my spare time? I sometimes feel I wish I knew a few people from work who went on maternity, and I could just get in touch with them, arrange for a coffee. So I think just enabling their employees to connect, creating a very intentional forum for employees to connect, share their experience, stay in touch, is going to be a huge benefit from my perspective.
Right. Do you think even opening up access, for example, to consultants who have expertise in sleep training, for instance, or breastfeeding? I mean, I agree that there is a boundary, right? Employers can only do so much, but perhaps enabling by giving access to, the right set of people, is that something that the employees would benefit from?
Yeah, I mean, if employers can afford it, yes, why not? But what is free to do and very helpful is at least, spread awareness that there are resources out there which can help you. And here are the list of, people that our employees have used before and they've liked it. So here are some breastfeeding and lactation consultants. Here are some midwives and nannies, etc. So just having that resource, which is free to create, but anybody can tap in, and just especially for new moms or new dads, just to know there are these things out there is hugely beneficial.
So for the guys who are listening in today, if you do need any assistance on this aspect, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Carrying on with one of the points that you had mentioned, Tatiana, when it came down to the childcare, backup childcare, for example, that you were talking about, in terms of other benefits, for instance, partnerships with childcare provider or on-site care or anything else that could be done to attract or retain women talent. Do you have any suggestions on how that can be done as quick wins?
So, yeah, so I think there are different elements, right? Like in terms of specific benefits, I think the ones that you mentioned are probably the most effective ones. I think there are two more. One is on the knowledge and learning and expertise. If you think about just like any employee, right? People who keep working, people keep learning new things, people keep growing. So this element of not kind of, I would think when I'm thinking about somebody going on maternity leave, it's almost not expected that this person will even think at all about anything but their child, right? However, a little bit of planning upfront before maternity leave and afterwards, after back from maternity leave, a little bit of focus of this knowledge building, expertise, feeling more integrated into the work environment, would be very helpful. And this could be done in a collaboration with an HR professional in any context. And then the other part is just about the emotional support and having some couple of extra conversations that hey, you're not the first one with the mom, right? Or hey, dad, you're still having a child, right? Still your child, so don't forget to spend some time with your newborn kid, and so that your wife can a little bit take a breath, right? So things like this about just setting up the overall narrative and mindset that it's a shared responsibility, that and that it's okay. No, I mean, everyone is having kids, right? It's just a way of how people are figuring out their lives around that in a way that it works for everyone.
Yeah, I think there's another bit as well, Tatiana, isn't it, where a lot of people only talk about the good aspects, and that could perhaps be a social bias that's there. They'll only talk about the good things because they feel they are going to be judged if they're open about their problems. But very, very few women actually come up, or very few dads come forward and say that we need support. For example, like what Ruchita was saying, that she was struggling in the first couple of weeks. So when they say that you have these blues, baby blues, that's a real thing, right? Nobody really tells you that baby blues is a real thing, because I struggled myself in the first month. And I think support from that aspect, like you rightly said, from an emotional standpoint, does make a lot of difference when it comes down to working parents, because moms are going to sit and cry because they're going through baby blues, and the dads are like, why are you crying? I don't get it. So yeah, I hear where you're coming from. Richard, what about the support that working parents like yourself, because you're a working dad, who will be spending a lot of time working from home in the in the current pandemic scenario with remote working, what kind of support do you think would be required to positively impact the earlier development of the child?
So I think simple things like remembering that parents don't stop being parents once they log on. What I mean by that is, if I'm working at home and I've got a 5-month-old, likelihood is he's going to cry. So if you hear crying in the background, don't put so much pressure on me to constantly pretend like I'm living in a bubble that doesn't include my child. Equally, as they grow older, right, when they start toddling and they start moving about, sometimes you might just need to have them sat on their knee, right? You might just need to hold the child as you're going along. You might just need those allowances that say, okay, I know we used to have a team meeting that starts at 8:30 every morning, but I now need to set up, get my child ready for the day, whether that is out of home childcare, whether that's in home, and you just have some things that you need to get set. Can we start it a bit later? Right, really small allowances that don't really have that big an impact on the overall output of the team. But what it does is it enables everyone in the team to actually contribute and not feel a guilt in having to make a decision between work and wider life. I don't like to say work and life. They are all the same thing. Life is part of your work. Work is part of your life even. So yeah, just remembering that your employees don't stop and start their lives at 9 and 5. Right? There is a continuation and a constant sense of being that in all of this, I am a manager, I am a chief of staff, I am a father, I am a husband, I am a son, I am a musician. All of these things exist at the same time, and it's just about enabling me to bring all of that to work.
I think one bit that I would like to share, given that you're talking about 9 to 5, the clock doesn't stop. My daughter works like a clock herself, so she knows when it's 5 and it's time to, time for the dad to come out. And there was an instance where she just barged in when he was on a customer call, just to go and say hi to everybody on the call. Now, it does get awkward at times when you are in client-facing roles, when you have your child barging in. I think that's also something that needs to be accepted in the current world, that, you can't really draw those boundaries if you're all working from home.
You can't, and I don't think they're needed, right? Why am I pretending that I don't have a child just because I'm on a client call? I have a child. The child may walk in at some point and say hi to me. I might give my child a hug. That is just something that exists and something that happens. Does it change the fact that I'm delivering good work for you? Probably not.
Well, it's a lovely conversation that we had. Thank you for all the inputs, Ruchita, Tatiana, and Richard. We have a question that's come in, and it says that the high cost of childcare in the UK is forcing a lot of women to give up their jobs. How can organizations support working mothers on this issue? Ruchita, would you want to take this, given that you are from HR?
I think one of the solutions that organizations used to struggle with earlier was letting women or parents work from home. But the pandemic has taught everybody that people can work from home, can work efficiently and deliver. I remember pre-pandemic that some of my employees would come and ask me, can I do 2 days work from home and 3 days work from home? And I've been culprit to say, look, our policy only allows a day per week, and we will have to look at it as an exception, and it would go through like rounds and rounds of conversation, that if we say yes to one of our employees to take 2 days or 3 days work from home, then what happens to other requests that comes in, etc., etc. So now it's like nobody even cares anymore where you work from, at least in the company I work for, and many of my friends. that I've heard from, that it working from home has become a norm. So I think that's the easier solution, because I don't think the companies will be able to give us an allowance on top of our salary for childcare. But what they can do is let us be more flexible, let us work from home, choose our hours, start late, finish late, start early, finish early, or have a staggered working hour. Also allowing flexibility to have reduced working week altogether. So many of my employees choose to work 3 days a week. That means reduction in salary, but that also means that they're able to look after their child and reduce their childcare expenses. And in return, we ensure that their career and their employment is not at risk. So we wouldn't say that because now you want to do 3 days a week, and we can create that for you. We can create an environment and role in which you can be productive, working reduced hours. So we try and do that, and we don't in return say that, oh, because now you want to do 3 days, we do not have any more use for you, because we would actually like a full-time person. What we then go and figure is there somebody else who wants to do 3 days or 2 days, and we create a job share opportunity. So I think bottom line is how much flexibility can employers provide, and the more they can provide that flexibility to parents, then they can figure out how much they can take care of childcare at home without having to employ another person, which is very expensive. No doubt, I'm trying to look for support myself, and the bill is a lot, and it makes you think, is it worth it? Should I be going into my job at all, looking at the bill for childcare? But if I know my employers are going to be flexible, then it helps me that I can look after my baby certain hour. When he sleeps, I can work. So that would be one solution. I don't think so I can suggest to any employer, why don't you increase the wages? No, I'm going to get fired for that.
But what about allowances that could be given? Because I think in the UK, the tax bands are pretty high, right? So if there could be benefits that can be given in terms of allowances for childcare, because I know there are companies in India that are doing that. They do give allowances for childcare. Would that be something that organizations would consider?
I'm not an expert on taxation. I have to, say that first. But I do know that the UK taxation works on a lump sum basis. So even if you get some benefit or allowance, it is taxed. So like in India, for example, I know that house rent allowance is up till a certain bracket is tax free, and a lot of employers, try and divide up the salary into different allowances to have that benefit. In UK, we have very little leeway on those, and most employers try to give that upfront anyway to their employees, because why not? It's a win-win for the employer and the employee. But there isn't much room in the UK taxation system for this. There are some vouchers, childcare vouchers, etc., which is given by a lot of employers, which helps with tax savings as well. But just giving a lump sum of your salary as an allowance, I don't think it is going to help.
Right. So I think we're running out of time. I'm just going to ask one last question before we close up. So all of you seem to be coming in from large corporates, and presuming that your support systems are well established. Is there any advice, perhaps Richard, you could give to startups or smaller organizations?
Yeah, so I think startups are in arguably an even better position because you have the space for flexibility. For bigger companies, a lot of the challenge with changing existing processes is just how much of it is already tied in, and the legal ramifications of trying to change things. When you are starting new, you can start with intention. So you can design your processes with inclusion at their heart. The idea is that you don't need to do things the way they've been done before. I mean, that's the whole benefit of a startup, right? Is to do what's not been done before. So that should include your benefits processes, your support processes, your view to what success looks like in your company.
Thanks, Richard. That was very insightful. Thanks a lot to the panel for taking the time out. It has been a great conversation. And since we are a startup ourselves and we would like to support working mothers, we're just running a discount of 10% for anybody who signs up with us this week with the code IWD2022. And with that, we would like to close the discussion today. Thank you everyone for joining, and thanks again to the panel.
Thank you.
Having us.
Bye.
Everyone.
Take care.